Hello, welcome to the Reframing Eye Care podcast. I am Dr. Maria Sampoulos with Dr. Rich Driscoll. We are talking about owning your own building for your private practice today. Rich has a wealth of knowledge from the last podcast to provide today on this. And I thought it was an important topic to discuss as it is one way for a lot of optometrists to have a successful career and if they own their own building. So welcome, Rich.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So tell us why, an optometrist should own their own building.
I remember whenever the lease negotiations would come up, I always kind of hated, my destiny being in someone else's hands. You come up and you got to start a year in advance, or 6 months at least. And I hated that negotiation, having someone else, have that control. If you have to move your practice, it's a big disruption to your practice and its continuity, how it runs and everything. And so I hated that. And then, I got to pay rent to somebody. Why not pay it to myself? And then plus there's just tax benefits to owning your own building. And so it's a control taxes. I didn't see a lot of downside to not to doing it.
Yeah. I always thought of as an advantage as well. You control your own destiny. The rent stays stable, right? You sleep better at night. Landlord. I had one optometrist, do a new space, fix it, and the landlord wanted to sell the property, so had to move. I mean, that's always that. And I was in a space at one point and then they kind of control it. They can raise your rent, they can take it away, they can do anything they want to do. So when I had an opportunity to purchase a practice, I made sure I purchased the building as well, because I knew that was, for my livelihood and for my future of my business. And then, the renovations that I did were for me. It wasn't for someone else.
Right.
And I have no regrets, but do any optometrists or people have regrets at purchasing commercial real estate as ownership?
I've talked to a few and largely it's because they didn't have enough guidance or didn't know enough in the process to build it to begin with, I think it's always been a good investment, but they made mistakes along the way because they didn't know what they're getting into, or the building had issues, things like that. So, but I think overall people really appreciate having their own building. It's just one thing you can check off your list. You don't have to worry about is someone yanking the rug out from under you. You have to go, you got a great location and you want to have that for the next 25, 30 years, why not take total control of it?
Of course. Yeah. So there's also tax advantages of having your own real estate, commercial real estate, and when you have your own practice. So tell us a little bit about that.
That's a big one. When you pay rent to yourself, that's considered passive income. And so it's taxed at a little bit lower rate. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but when you do your taxes and stuff, that's what they tell me. And so it's a way of taking money out of the practice at a lower rate, basically. And I always encourage optometrists, they always think they want to make the practice, super, super profitable. So they give themselves low rent. I think that's a mistake. I think you should pay market rent, maybe at the high end of market rent, frankly, because it's taxed at a lower rate. Your commercial building is a business separate from your practice, and it needs to be run separately in an optimal way. But the two are kind of synergistic. The bottom line is, how much money you take home at the end of the year. And so paying yourself a good, fair rent is important. And when that extra rent there, you pay as passive income at a lower rate, but there's also tax benefits from depreciation of the building. So that's a huge one. So when you put in, if you remodel the carpet, put down new floor or a new roof, new air conditioning units, those things all need to be depreciated. And optometrists a lot of times don't know about something called cost segregation analysis. And what that does is when a person comes in and installs new things, those things depreciate at different rates. Like the roof might depreciate over 20 or 30 years, but the carpet might be 5. If you put up new paint and new fixtures, those might be 5 years. So with cost segregation analysis, they come in there and figure out how much of the improvements depreciate in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just running out for the 30 years. Send that to the accountant, and they can depreciate that way. So a lot of times, a lot of that stuff, they might get a depreciation of maybe 40 or 50% of that just in the first few years, and not depreciate it out over 30 years.
Yeah. Is it better to, purchase an existing building or, ground up?
That depends. The bottom line is purchase one or the other, but it depends. If you're like I know you're in the Northeast, there those areas might be heavily developed. There might not be a lot of land available
Yeah.
to build a new building, or those where there is new land, it's not a very attractive location. It still comes down to location, location, location. So I would never want to move my practice to a less desirable location just so I can own the building. So if there's a commercial building already in existence, or maybe it's not a commercial building, but you can rezone it and then buy it and put your practice in there and the location's great, I'd buy an existing building. But say there's a land available, or the current buildings that are built are too expensive. It's cheaper to build a building, or what you want something that doesn't really exist. Then yeah, do a new construction. The advantage though with buying an existing building is your knowns. More of your knowns are known, and so you already know how much it's going to cost. There's no surprises with construction or delays in construction. Those delays cost money and things like that. So it just, you just have to run the numbers and see which one works as a with a building being our consideration as a separate business, and would your practice like to rent from that
Yeah.
location?
Yeah, I think when I purchased the building, it was an opportunity. There's not a lot of land. It wasn't ideal, but you remodel it the way you want, you find the opportunity. And for me, I like the space. It was big. It was on a main street in Rhode Island where it's busy. People know, right? And there's landmarks that people know about if people live here for a while, but also the fact that I could rent out space. So,
Mhm.
it is a space where I have a tenant there. And for me, it is additional income. And it's great because I think of it as, okay, she's paying my utilities, she's paying my taxes, I'm rent free here. So that's an additional bonus for me
Mhm.
is this. And over time, if they stayed there for 30 years, it'd be like $300,000 worth of income that I would have got from a tenant for space. And obviously, if I grow, my practice grows, I have that ability to use that if I choose to. But there's a lot of advantages for these things. So tell us about, your thought process on that, and if it's best to, just have a practice for the building or, have rentals.
I think you have to decide on whether you want to be a landlord or not. And I think most of us would. I mean, I think really for all the benefits and advantages, it's not that big of a deal to have tenants. So I would have tenants if possible. So most of us, we might buy a building of, 3,000, 7,000 square feet, somewhere in that range is pretty common. And there's, so it gives us space to have other practice, other people in there, businesses. It's also, I think, advantageous. Those businesses could be synergistic to you. There could be a learning center next to you, or, maybe a pediatrician or something like that. So there's advantages, not being just sole freestanding, having other businesses next to you.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, if you're
I think it's
strategic,
great.
you have a pediatrician, right? You have referrals in a sense.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's beneficial. I think I
Yeah.
think that's good for optometrists to think about. But for those of us like maybe in the Midwest that can build, what are some tips for building construction from the beginning? Because like you said, it could be disastrous, and how do we know what to look out for? What does the process look like?
Yeah, the process, you kind of need to put a team together. So it is a bigger deal, doing construction. Now, if you ever built a house, that would be helpful, or if you ever remodeled a house, that also is kind of helpful skills you would have learned. So, but you need to put a team together, and probably the first person on the team is probably a commercial broker. I wouldn't use a residential broker or your your friend or something like that. And it really needs to be a commercial broker. They know more what's going on, what the going rate is, and things like that. So they can be a great asset for you, and they can also help you in finding like the other people on your team that you might need, like a commercial lawyer or architects, and give you tips on contractors, things like that. But you're also going to need an architect and a civil engineer, and all of those people are crucial to the whole process, and because you're gonna need all of them during that. But you just need you need to scout a location. drive around and find out what has good traffic flow, and it still comes down to location, location, location. Find out where they best place be to put the practice, and then see what's available, and talk to your commercial broker, and you make an offer, and once your offer's made, then you got to do you got usually like 60 days, something like that, to do due diligence. And you really want to get as much done during that time as possible, because you don't own the building or the land yet. So you're not paying on it yet. So you're you have a time to explore it for free. And the more you can get done during that time, the less it's going to cost you in the end. And so you have to figure out, the land you want to buy, is it permitted for what you want to do? Can you put, medical on there? Is it big enough for the amount of parking you need? So you have to determine all those things ahead of time before you decide to buy it. Once you have all that stuff done, then you can have a civil engineer will have to come in and kind of do a rough layout of what the site plan is going to look like, how much parking there is, where are the fire lanes, all kinds of things like that. And the city has to approve it. So you want to get those things done before you buy the land, so you're not buying something that you actually can't build what you want on it.
Yeah.
And
you have to be very careful.
Yeah, very much so. So then
I
once you get that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I had looked at one proper land for sale, and I was like, why is this, affordable, and been here for a while. It was like wetlands, or it was flooded area, and you can't build on it. So you got to be very careful on things like that.
Yeah. I had one where the going in there, and the city wanted us to put a retention pond in there. When we put a retention pond in there, that killed our parking. We didn't have parking to put a building on. So you got to figure that stuff out ahead of time. And, once you get that stuff, you can build what you want on there, and your architect comes in and, builds plans, city approves them. And then you have to go get out and get bids, and, with numerous contractors, and it's not always, just like in anything, it's not always best to take the cheapest one. You gotta get referrals on your contractors, check them out, look at their buildings, talk to the people that they built for. How are they to work with? There's all, just like anything else like that. But some people might do a build a suit, which is a different way of doing it, where the contractor you pick out, you use his people, you use his site engineer or her, their site engineer, their architect, all those things. But can be, it's more hands off, but it may be a little bit more expensive because you're not bidding things out. But that's not necessarily bad process. But then once the building's built, then you just do your punch list, get your inspections and all that thing, and then you can move in.
Yeah. So an optometrist, do they need to have a separate company for their, building that they own? They need to have a lease for this. How does that work out once you get this situated and get rolling?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, but yes, I would definitely want to have a separate company, and it really needs to be run as its own independent company. It can't stand on its own. If the building you're buying or building can't run on its own, it's not profitable on its own, then it's probably not a good deal to run. But it needs to be its own company, own tax ID, separate checking accounts, all that stuff, and just it shouldn't be a part of your practice. It's got to be separate.
Yeah, I think for even liability and stuff like that, you want it to be separate, because someone can fall and you don't want them to practice. They have that, but you have insurance for all that. I mean, you have to have that. The banks want all that. The lawyers are going to tell you it's not hard. It's just an LLC that you set up. So I think that's important. I think every optometrist that owns property usually has that separate. So
it's a simple process.
If the lawyer doesn't tell you, you got to get a new lawyer.
For sure.
That's basic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about this. I think it's very important for the future of optometry private practice businesses to own real estate for their own practice. I think it's a way for them to build wealth and, retirement funds to help grow as well. Like I said, and for me, it could be, the tenant's paying over time, 30 years is $300K. That's a retirement in itself. So that's very important. So if someone wanted to contact you, what is your email?
My email is rich, RICH, at providerscapital.com.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.